Our next speaker is Dr. Ripudaman Singh, Chief Technological Officer at ARCEDI from Denmark, and he will discuss cell-based non-invasive prenatal testing. Is it still a distant star? Ripu, please go ahead.
Thank you, Yuval, for inviting me today to talk about cell-based NIPT. And I would quickly jump into the topic. So if you look at consider the current prenatal testing scenarios, you have the invasive test on one side and the non-invasive test on the other side. So invasive chorionic villus sampling, and non-invasive, there are two technologies, cell-free NIPT and cell-based NIPT. And both of them are non-invasive. And if we compare these three technologies on a matrix of how much risk and stress they have, and on the other side, talking about the purity of the genome that you get from these samples, and how much information about the genetic status of the fetus you can get from these sampling, then you can see that the CBS and amniocentesis, which are based on biopsies, of course, you have access to pure fetal information, and that also means that you have a better coverage of analysis. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the cell-free NIPT, which is based on the analysis of cell-free fetal DNA fragments in the plasma of the maternal blood. So because these are smaller fragments that need to be analyzed, so of course, information that you can get from this sample is quite limited. So you would imagine that you would like to get the best of these two. So some kind of technology or testing which gives you a pure information about the fetal genome, and at the same time, it should be non-invasive. And that's where the cell-based NIPT comes into play. And as I mentioned earlier, the cell-free NIPT also comes with a little bit of limitations because these are based on the analysis of cell-free DNA, fetal DNA in the maternal plasma. So it is, of course, affected by the maternal conditions as well. And these maternal conditions range from maternal malignancies to high BMI. If the mother is a mosaic for certain conditions, then it will be difficult to get a reliable test. And also because we are dealing with short fragments of the fetal DNA, and some of the conditions or the syndromes which are repeats, like Fragile X, will be difficult to analyze and give a reliable answer. And of course, if the mother is also a carrier of certain conditions, single gene disorders, it will also be difficult to do cell-free NIPT. And then there's also always a residual risk of some of the clinically significant CNVs that go kind of unchecked or untested with NIPT. And high BMI, of course, is a challenge in some of the countries. And ACMG, in one of its guidelines, recent guidelines, it also says that high BMI leads to inequity when it comes to NIPT. So they were recommending other technologies that basically improve the health equity, which comes with the high BMI and false positives for NIPTs. So even though there are some limitations with cell-free NIPT, these tests have been, the first test was launched in 2011, and it's a crowded field, you can see from this pyramid as well. So on the bottom of this pyramid, there are 13 tests which are offered by 9 different companies. So of course, this is just kind of a representation. I'm pretty sure there are more companies and more NIPT offerings. But these are some of the popular ones. So on the bottom of the pyramid, you have all the tests that test for common aneuploidies. And as you go up, there are fewer that add more conditions to the menu. And then you have the sex chromosome aneuploidies. And then there are even fewer that look for all the aneuploidies. And then there are less than half or around half that add selected deletions and duplications in the testing kind of offering. And we can see that there's also a huge range of what different deletions, duplication syndromes they offer testing for. So some of the tests only test for one condition, the most common one, the DiGeorge syndrome, 22q11 deletion syndrome. And then there are some other companies that offer testing for 84 different deletions and duplications, for example, NIFTY Pro. And when you almost reach the top of the pyramid, you have a couple of tests that claim to do a copy number variation analysis in the whole genome for the CNVs that are larger than 7 megabase. But there's a very recent article where they mentioned that even after having a complete comprehensive NIPT that's in the market right now, you still have a significant residual risk of clinically significant CNVs. And that's actually quite, even the risk is larger than some of the common aneuploidies. So there is this top of the pyramid, which still is not targeted and needs to be addressed. And the idea is that can there be even a more comprehensive NIPT based on fetal cells that can achieve that goal? And fetal cells, it's interesting because the quest of fetal cells have preceded the quest for cell-free NIPT, cell-free DNA. It's a quest that has, been there for the last 60, 70 years. The presence of fetal cells was known. There were also technologies that were used to isolate them, but then there were challenges with the rarity of these cells because some estimates say that there are one fetal cell among a million maternal cells. So it was difficult to isolate them. There was little knowledge about the markers that they expressed and also the type of the cells that circulated maternal blood. Also issues with the reliable technologies that could isolate these rare cells from maternal blood in a more kind of consistent manner. And of course, in the end, I mean, it's not just about finding cells, but being able to isolate these cells and perform genetic analysis on them. So there have been some challenges with respect to finding these rare cells, which can promise a high fetal content, genome content for analysis. And this is just to give you a quick timeline of our initiative in this field. We have, of course, been working on this for 16, 17 years and taking a bottom-up approach, finding the type of the cells, looking at the markers, working on the technology, and then launched a product in April of 2021. And then we recently published our clinical data in collaboration with 5 different hospitals in Denmark. Quickly taking you through the technology, the blood samples are collected from pregnant women. 30 ml of blood is collected, and then RBCs are lysed, white blood cells are pelleted, and then fetal cells are enriched using Milteney's magnetic activated cell sorting. And then after fetal cells are enriched and stained with the markers, a combination of markers. So we have a patent that's granted on the use of these markers for enrichment and staining of fetal cells. The cells are then sorted individually using FACS, and we recently also were granted a patent in the US and Europe for single cell sorting of fetal cells. Once they are sorted, they are then amplified, the fetal DNA. The STR is performed on the portion of the DNA to verify that the cell that was isolated is fetal or maternal, and then eventually the DNA is analyzed. And currently, it's analyzed by ARCEDI. I will directly take you through some of the cases that kind of again proving that, kind of showing some evidence on whether cell-based NIPT can sit on top of that pyramid. So we have 2 cases that we published a few years back. So there was a woman who was 28 years old, and she had the first pregnancy and had 6 miscarriages in the last 6 months. Oh, sorry, 2 miscarriages in the last 6 months. And then she went through the combined first trimester screening and came out to be high risk. But she chose NIPT over CVS. So blood sample was taken from her. And cell-free NIPT analysis was done, as is currently being offered in Denmark to high-risk pregnancies. And then cell-based NIPT was also performed. So 3 blood tubes were collected from her and sent to our labs. And then cell-based NIPT showed that she had a 7.8 megabase deletion on the long arm of chromosome 15, leading to Prader-Willi syndrome. And the cell-free NIPT came out to be normal. So of course, it's a screening test currently. So all the observations have to be confirmed by invasive testing. Then she was offered CVS. And the results of cell-based NIPT were corroborated by the CVS results. And then there was another woman who was 45 years old, also had 1 prior miscarriage in the last 6 months, and was categorized as high risk. First, she chose CVS, but it was not possible to take biopsy from her, so she opted for NIPT. So again, like the first case, this blood sample was taken and analyzed with cell-free NIPT and cell-based NIPT. And cell-based NIPT showed a 4.6 megabase deletion on 3P. And because she couldn't go for CVS, so she was followed up by amniocentesis, and it showed what the cell-based NIPT showed, that there was a deletion on the long arm of chromosome P, leading to a neurodegenerative disorder. And then another case, I talked about the maternal conditions that can basically also influence the cell-free NIPT results. And this is a classical case here, where women had 3 spontaneous miscarriages, and then she came to the clinic and found out that she was a mosaic for Turner syndrome. But she became pregnant without any reproductive assistance, and she opted for NIPT. And the sample was sent again for cell-free NIPT and cell-based NIPT. Cell-based NIPT showed that the fetus was normal. However, the cell-free NIPT gave a result that was inconclusive. So, so she did not. Then she went for CVS and was shown that the child was normal. Another case here of a woman who was a mosaic for deletion on the short arm of chromosome X. And she chose cell-free NIPT and cell-based NIPT. And cell-based NIPT confirmed that it was done postnatally, the confirmation, because she did not go for any invasive sampling, invasive testing. That the postnatal analysis on the child showed that the karyotype was non-mosaic deletion on the short arm of chromosome on X. Yeah. I will now take you through some of the clinical data that we published recently, and this was a study that was performed in collaboration with different hospitals in Denmark. So in study 1, sample was collected from women who opted for CVS because they were categorized as high risk after combined first trimester screening. And then the analysis from cell-based NIPT was compared with the results of CVS. In the second study, these were also high-risk women, but who chose cell-free NIPT instead of CVS. And then blood sample was also collected from them to do the cell-based NIPT analysis. So the first study where we compared NIPT with CVS, there were 92 women undergoing CVS, and there were 52 normal among them and 39 abnormal. And one of the women had the 2 abnormalities, non-mosaic trisomy 21 and a CNV. And the cell-based NIPT was analyzed with CMA, and the threshold of analysis was 1 megabase. So here you see in the pie chart of the different conditions that were found by cell-based NIPT and confirmed by CBS. And as is kind of the prevalence of trisomies is higher in the population. You can see there were 19 cases of trisomy 21, 3 of trisomy 18, 1 of 13, and there were also sex chromosomal abnormalities that were found and confirmed by CBS. And then there were also non-mosaic CNVs, 6 cases. And they range from 1.6 megabase deletion to 30.5 megabase deletion on chromosome X. So the whole range from 1.6 to 30.5. And then there were also these mosaic cases that were confirmed by cell-based NIPT. There were 1 for trisomy 3, 1 for trisomy 21, and then a deletion on the 5p for 33.2 megabase deletion. And there were 4 cases that mosaic cases that were not picked up by cell-based NIPT, and that's of course a challenge that we have. I'll talk about it in a short while from now. And then there were 2 that were duplication and 1 that was deletion, but a 20 to 30% grade mosaicism. Probably that was the reason it was not picked up. Just compiling the data, because we didn't have any false positives and false negatives, but comparing with the results from CBS for common trisomies, SCAs, and CNVs. So of course, the specificity and sensitivity was 100%, but we had issues with mosaic cases that were not picked up by cell-based NIPT. So the specificity was 38% for these 4 cases. The second study where we compared the performance of cell-based NIPT with cell-free NIPT. These, as I mentioned before, these are the women who chose cell-free NIPT over CBS, and then a sample was taken from them for cell-based NIPT as well. 282 samples were collected from 5 hospitals, and then there were results from 252, which could be compared between these 2 different technologies. And the cell-free NIPT was performed using Illumina's VeriSec, which they use here in Denmark. Some of the findings from this study, there were 4 trisomy 21 cases and 3 trisomy 18 cases. But then there were 3 CNVs which were not picked up by cell-free NIPT, but were picked up by cell-based NIPT. And of these 3 cases, 2 were false positives, actually. And then there was 1 29 megabase deletion on 5p, which was not picked up by cell-free NIPT, but then was confirmed by CBS. And then there is a reason why they were not picked. Currently, the technology that we have, or the method that we have, the protocol, is that when we isolate these cells and they are confirmed to be fetal, the DNA from all the fetal cells are pooled. So at least the DNA from 3 cells are pooled and analyzed together. And that's primarily to do it inexpensively and have a quick result than analyzing single cells. So that was the reason that this first case was false positive, because you can see a duplication was shown on chromosome 7. However, when these cells were analyzed individually, then it did not show this duplication on chromosome 7. And it's the same with the other cell where 8 megabase duplication was shown on chromosome 2. And when these cells were analyzed individually, you can see that one of the cell the quality was quite bad. That led to these signals in the pool of the cells when they were analyzed together. And I will just quickly go through, tell you a little bit about the complete test. And this is a commercial test that's already out in the Danish market, and 17 different clinics are offering it. So we have also collected, because this has been going on since, or it was launched in April 21. So we have some data on the performance of the test. I should just add that not all the confirmations from cell-based NIPT are followed up, because there are also some women who come from Norway for these testing. So of course, all the women who are in Denmark, they end up getting counsel, and then they also get a confirmatory test. But it's not true for all the women, because then the ones who are coming from other places, they have their own follow-up kind of systems. So as I mentioned, there are 17 clinics in Denmark sending the blood sample to a centralized lab in Aarhus in Denmark. And samples are processed using the same technology and method I showed you before. And the whole genome DNA is analyzed with CMA. And normal findings are communicated to the pregnant women. And if there's any unusual finding, then the healthcare professional here in the public health sector talks to the pregnant woman, and then she's given genetic counseling. And this is what the EVITA test has shown. So we have analyzed 268 samples as of 11th of September this year. So there were few cases of trisomies and also SCAs. There was one case with CNV of 5 megabase, I think it's a deletion, and then 7 mosaic cases. Because this is a controlled kind of analysis, and we had the total number of samples and the number of fetal cells, they were not counted to get, we are not counting the number of fetal cells because we take a few cells that come out of single cell sorting, and then we analyze them using STR. So if we have enough cells, we don't go on analyzing all the cells that are sorted. So we don't know the absolute value of fetal cells that come out of these samples. But then we have a no-call rate of 8.2%. And these are split into these different categories, the reasons why the sample ended up being no call. So of course, most of them were because fetal cells were not found in 5.6% of the cases. And then there was some issue with the downstream analysis, and then technical failure. That's basically the clinic not sending enough blood sample to us or something. There were 2 cases where there was some failure in the downstream analysis in the lab. And then there was one mosaic case that was followed up by another sample. So if you just look at the fetal cells which were isolated, and there approximately 94% of the samples, they give some fetal cells for analysis. And then for the samples that do not give us results the first time, we offer the pregnant women a redraw. And so when we have a redraw from these samples, then the no-call rate, of course, drops tremendously, and we are able to give answer from 98% of the samples that we process. I'll quickly take you through some of the CNV. So these are, of course, cases where we found something with CBS or ACGH, and then these samples were sent to our lab. The blood sample was sent to us to see whether we can pick up these CNVs, and they range from 1.6 megabase deletion to 30 megabase deletion. And all of these were confirmed using the current analysis. We are in the process of slowly transitioning to the NGS platform. The reason that we have used ARCEDI all these years is because the CBS material that the clinic in the hospital gets here is analyzed by CMA. So in order to get a head-on comparison with the gold standard, we had to rely on ARCEDI. But we have recently acquired Illumina's sequencer, and then we are also trying to test all these samples or cells from different samples which did not give us results by ARCEDI, and to see whether we can get a better detection when we analyze the cells with NGS. And then that's a paired read for 50 million reads currently. And of course, I mean, we can increase that, and maybe the resolution gets better as well. But you can see I've split this into deletions and duplications. Deletions, of course, are easier to analyze, but interestingly, all these duplication cases ranging from 0.5 to 2.8, we were able to pick up duplications down to 1.3 megabase. Going back to this pyramid, so based on all the data and what we see with respect to the resolution of analysis by cell-based NIPT, I think we can kind of comfortably we can propose that cell-based NIPT can detect smaller CNVs as well. How low we can go, of course, it also requires big clinical studies to look at the performance. But the fact that transitioning to other downstream analysis platforms like NGS might also help in improving the detection of these CNVs using the fetal cells. And I'll quickly go through some of the data that we also have from monogenic diseases. Lena Jeppesen, who was a PhD student and now is employed at ARCEDI, she presented at COGEN last year, and she did a huge body of work on monogenic diseases just to see if we can also use the fetal cell DNA to find some of these monogenic disorders. So this was the first paper she published. It was a proof of concept, a case where the mother was a carrier and the father was carrier for 2 different polymorphisms. And then she designed the analysis platform where she had the STR markers to differentiate between the fetal and maternal cell, so the kind of confirming the origin of the cell, and then the targeted PCR around that region to show whether the fetus also carries that polymorphism. So what she found was that when 7 trophoblasts, again for this analysis, they were pooled together, that the fetus was a carrier for the F508 deletion variant, but was normal for the variant that the father carried. Then she did this big study on 50 common mutations using a kit that's commercially available, where there were 2 groups. One was the validation group, where the women were carriers. They were going for CBS analysis and trying to see if the fetus was normal or not, or a carrier. And then there was a screening group where these women were stratified to be high risk based on the first trimester screening, and they gave the sample for CVS analysis, for genome-wide analysis, but then we also got the sample to see whether they were carriers or for cystic fibrosis. And then 2 different methods were used, an NGS-based method and a fragment length analysis method. And the results were corroborated with the CVS results for all the different cases in the validation group, the women who were carriers, and also in the screening group. That most of them are normal, but then there were also these findings that some of the women who did not know that they were carriers, that was found that they were carrier, but the fetus was normal. And in this case, the fetus was normal as well. So these were incidental findings for the women who went for genome-wide analysis, but were given this CFTR variant analysis. And then we have a collaboration with the Aalborg University Hospital. There's a PGT-M lab there. And the whole idea was that if we could use fetal cells to confirm the post-PGT analysis, so instead of doing the CVS, and they have a panel of different diseases that they screened for. And there were these 8 cases where either the father or the mother were carriers of different conditions and mutations, and then they showed that the CBS post-PGT-M was normal, and this was also confirmed by a cell-based analysis. So showing that eventually the cell-based analysis could also be used for these targeted analysis of these different conditions. In the end, I would like to thank the different hospitals we are in collaboration with. So these are just named the Aalborg University Hospital, the data I showed right now, also Aarhus University Hospital, but there have been other hospitals in this region that were part of the clinical study. I would like to thank all of them. And also the ARCEDI team, the ones who are currently working here, and also who contributed throughout these years in getting us where we are right now. And in the end, of course, dedication to Steen Kulru, who was the co-founder of ARCEDI, and had worked with fetal cells for 2-3 decades. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ripu. I had written down a few questions, but actually you've answered most of them during your talk. So moving on to NGS platform, do you envision the possibility of performing whole exome sequencing and looking for de novo point mutations in such fetal cells? Is that something that you are looking at?
We have not considered that yet, but that's always in back of the mind, and we have very close discussions with the clinicians here in the public hospital, what they would like to see out of that. But of course, that's not the country that we are working on. But if it is possible, we need to have some validation data from these analyses as well. But why not? I would say. I mean.
Yeah.
It depends on where we are doing and what are the ethical implications. I think that's a big debate we are getting into here as well. So.
Yeah, and I saw that you almost consistently are able to retrieve such fetal cells, perhaps not even in the first, but then subsequently in the second draw. But given that, would you say that the test is a diagnostic test or a screening test? This is like a philosophical question, but how would you
like to say it? Let me, because I might be biased, Yuval. What would you like to call it? Eventually, it has to go in the hands of the people like you, the clinicians who are going to use it. So it can be a transition, maybe. The first step could be, okay, there is also almost 10% false positive rates when we talk about common aneuploidies detected by NIPT. So if we are not aiming high right now, and the evidence says that we have that probably be on the top of the pyramid, we can sit quite comfortably. But maybe if you have to take small steps, maybe diagnostics for trisomies.
Yes.
And then for RATs, for SCAs, and maybe for some of the targeted deletions and duplications. And then we'll reach the top of the pyramid in the offering, not in what we can do right now. So I think it's a very interesting question. We deal with that every day, how to position it. So we're in the middle of this matrix I showed you between cell-free NIPT and CBS. How far do we reach? That's, I think, an interesting discussion.
So if you were to analyze each retrieved cell individually and have confirmation, like each one of the cells confirms the diagnostic, I would consider that as a diagnostic test. So if we were able to retrieve a number of cells and they each show the same type of abnormality consistently, I would be comfortable in doing that. But of course, that increases cost. Yes. But hopefully, cost of sequencing will continue to drop. So perhaps that will be the solution.
Exactly. We have the same thought that currently, of course, it becomes very expensive to analyze with ARCEDI, but eventually the sequencing cost has to decrease. It's also like we would like to sequence deep to increase the coverage, but that also comes with the cost. So it's like we need to choose between the cost and how much information we can get out of it. So
absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much. Hopes to see you soon next year in Paris. Probably.
Thank you so much. Good. Take care. Bye.
Bye.